Imagine this. It's 1975 and humanity is about to do something truly amazing. 50 years ago, NASA sent two incredible explorers on a long journey through space. These were not people, but two robotic spacecraft named Viking 1 and Viking 2. Their destination was Mars, the fourth planet from our sun. This was a very big deal. Before this moment, we had only seen Mars from far away or with ships that flew by. No one had ever successfully landed a working machine on its surface. The Viking missions were built to change that, to give us our very first look from the ground of this mysterious red world. The excitement was cosmic. Each Viking spacecraft was actually two parts working together as a team. There was an orbiter, which would circle high above Mars, and a lander, which would bravely descend to the surface. The orbiter's job was to map the planet, study its weather, and act as a communication relay back to Earth. The lander, on the other hand, was the star of the show. After a long voyage of nearly a year, Viking 1's lander detached and began its careful descent. On July 20, 1976, it touched down safely. This was a historic moment, the first time we had a functioning laboratory on another planet. A few weeks later, Viking 2 did the same thing in a different location. The main goal of these missions was incredibly ambitious, to search for life. But they were also designed to be our eyes and ears on Mars. The landers carried cameras that would send back the first color pictures from the Martian surface. We saw a rusty, rocky landscape under a beautiful pink sky. The sky's color was a surprise caused by fine red dust kicked up by the wind and suspended in the thin air. The landers also had instruments to study the Martian atmosphere, measure the temperature, and check the wind speed. For the first time, we were experiencing Mars not as a distant point of light, but as a real place. The orbiters were just as important, painting a complete picture of the planet from above. They flew over the entire surface of Mars, taking thousands of pictures. These images revealed giant volcanoes, much bigger than any on Earth, and vast canyons that stretched for thousands of miles. They showed us channels that looked like they were carved by flowing water a long time ago. These discoveries told us that Mars was not always the cold, dry desert we see today. It suggested a past where the planet was warmer and wetter, a place that might have once been more suitable for life to begin and thrive. The journey had just begun. The most exciting part of the Viking mission was its search for tiny living things or microbes in the Martian soil. To do this, each lander had a small robotic arm. This arm reached out, scooped up a sample of the red dirt, and brought it inside the lander. The soil was then placed into 3 different experiments inside special protected chambers. These experiments were designed to see if anything in the soil was alive in the way we understand it. Scientists on Earth waited anxiously, hoping to see a sign that we were not alone in the solar system. It was a cosmic test of a profound question. Each of the 3 biology experiments worked in a slightly different way. Think of them like offering different kinds of food to see if anything would eat it. The first experiment, called the labeled release experiment, added a drop of liquid nutrients to the soil. This food contained a special kind of carbon that was radioactive. If there were microbes in the soil, they would eat the nutrients and release gas containing that radioactive carbon. This would be a strong signal that something was metabolizing or processing food, just like living things do on Earth. It was a clever way to listen for the faintest whisper of life. Another experiment, called the gas exchange experiment, worked differently. It added a rich soup of nutrients and water to the Martian soil sample. The idea here was to see if any gases were produced or consumed by living organisms. For example, if microbes were present, they might release oxygen, carbon dioxide, or other gases as they became active in the wet environment. Scientists watched the air inside the test chamber very carefully, looking for any changes. They wanted to see if the soil would breathe when it was given water and food, which would be a sure sign that something dynamic was happening within that little scoop of alien dirt. The third experiment was called the pyrolytic release experiment. This one tried to mimic the conditions on Mars more closely. It didn't add water or liquid food. Instead, it exposed the soil to an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, much like the real Martian air, but with radioactive carbon atoms. After a few days, the soil was heated up to see if any of that radioactive carbon had been absorbed into the soil. If microbes were using sunlight and the Martian air to make food, like plants do, this test might have detected it. Together, these 3 experiments were our best attempt to find life beyond Earth. When the results from the Viking biology experiment started coming back to Earth, scientists were both thrilled and confused. The labeled release experiment, the one that added radioactive food, gave a positive result. Gas containing the radioactive carbon was released from the soil, exactly as you would expect if tiny Martian microbes were eating the meal they were given. This was an incredibly exciting moment. For a short time, it seemed like we had found evidence of life on Mars. The data looked good, and the science team double-checked everything. Could this be it? Was this the discovery humanity had been waiting for generations to find? However, the other two experiments told a different story. The gas exchange experiment also showed activity. When water was added to the soil, a large amount of oxygen was suddenly released. This was surprising, but scientists thought it might not be caused by life. It could be the result of strange, highly reactive chemicals in the soil reacting with the water. The third experiment, the pyrolytic release, gave results that were mostly negative or inconclusive. So, one experiment seemed to say yes to life while the other two seemed to say no. It was a scientific puzzle with conflicting clues, and the answer was far from clear. To make the mystery even deeper, another instrument on the landers searched for organic molecules. These are the carbon-based molecules that make up all known life. Scientists expected to find at least some, even if they just came from meteorites that had fallen on Mars over billions of years. But the Viking experiment found none. Not a single trace. This was a huge blow to the idea of life on Mars. How could there be living things that metabolize food, as one experiment suggested, but leave behind no organic building blocks? It just didn't add up. Most scientists concluded that the life signal was probably just unusual chemistry, not biology. For decades, this remained a confusing puzzle. The positive life signal from one experiment, but the lack of organic molecules was a major contradiction. Then many years later, in 2008, another NASA spacecraft, the Phoenix lander, made a key discovery. It found a chemical in the Martian soil called perchlorate. Scientists realized that when perchlorate is heated up, it can destroy organic molecules. This was a game changer. The Viking experiment that looked for organics had heated the soil to run its test. It was very possible that organic molecules were in the soil all along, but the Viking experiment itself accidentally destroyed them. The mystery was far from solved. So, did the Viking missions find life on Mars? The official answer is no. The results were too ambiguous, too contradictory to make such an extraordinary claim. The strange chemical reactions in the soil offered a non-biological explanation for what the experiments saw. Without the discovery of organic molecules to back it up, the positive signal from the labeled release experiment was not enough to convince most of the scientific community. The missions did not give us a simple yes or no. Instead, they showed us that Mars is a much more complex and chemically active place than we ever imagined. They left us with a tantalizing mystery. Even without finding life, the Viking missions were a monumental success. They gave us our first detailed view of the Martian environment. The thousands of images they took and the data they collected taught us about the planet's history, its weather, and its geology. We learned that Mars once had a thicker atmosphere, and that water likely flowed on its surface. These discoveries completely changed our understanding of the Red Planet, and laid the foundation for every single Mars mission that has followed since. Every rover and orbiter sent to Mars in the last 50 years builds upon the knowledge that Viking gave us. Today, on the 50th anniversary of their launch, the Viking missions are more relevant than ever. Scientists are still studying the old data, re-examining it with new knowledge. Some researchers still argue that the results from the labeled release experiment really were a sign of life, and that the discovery of perchlorate makes that idea more plausible, not less. The debate continues, which is a sign of a healthy and exciting scientific process. Viking taught us a critical lesson. Searching for alien life is hard, and we must be careful not to jump to conclusions either for or against its existence. The legacy of Viking is one of bold exploration and enduring questions. These two brave spacecraft were pioneers, venturing into the unknown and giving us our first real taste of another world. They didn't give us all the answers, but they gave us better questions to ask. As we continue to send more advanced robots to Mars and plan for future human explorers, we follow in the tracks left by Viking. Their mission to unveil Mars's mysteries continues to this day, inspiring a new generation to look up at that little red dot in the night sky and wonder, what else is waiting to be discovered?